please keep eating. We're trying to get in a couple of sessions efficiently, so we're going to get started. I'm Matt Grossman. I'm director of the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research at Michigan State. We're pleased to put this on in conjunction with the House and Senate business offices. And we do want this series of sessions to be a resource for you. So if you have ideas about topics or things that you want covered, please do so. This new format, we're glad to see all of you, should be continuing, so we'll try to do the short double sessions in mornings from here out. That means that we won't be able to do it simultaneously on Zoom, but we will have video that we will send you afterwards along with the PowerPoint presentations. So we didn't leave time for for introduction, so you are spared the necessity of the cheesy introductions this morning. But I hope you get a chance to at least talk with a few of your neighbors. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the professor and Morris Chair in State and Local Government Finance and Policy at Michigan State. The best person to be introducing you to Michigan local government. Here is Mark Skidmore.
Good morning. Good morning. How many of you have maybe worked in local government at some point in your career? Oh, all right, yes. So for you, some of the things that I'm going to talk about might be a little bit, you'll be familiar with it already, and others will be familiar with some of this information. And we all know that within our federalist system, which I'll talk about in more detail, we have different layers of government, and state government oversees and coordinates to provide services for citizens all over the state. And so what we want to do today is talk about that, talk about the structure of local government, what the responsibilities are, how things fit together to provide a core set of services for the citizens of Michigan. Can you all hear me all right? Is that coming through? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Okay, so you can see on the screens around a PowerPoint, and so I'm just going to use this as a guide. And what I'd like to start with is very big picture kinds of things. What is the role of government in a market economy? The United States is a market economy. Why do we need government? What is a federalist system, and how does state government and local government fit within that overall structure? So that's big picture, and then we'll narrow down and spend most of our time on Michigan local government structure and responsibilities. One thing I will mention is that you can see that we have many layers of local government. Counties, townships, villages, cities, a whole range of special purpose governments, and school districts. And we're not going to talk about school districts. We could spend all day on schools alone. But they do fit within local government. So what is the role of government in a market economy? And I've highlighted some bullet points here. One, to protect individuals and property rights. That makes sense. Two, although market economies do lots of things really well, they don't provide all of the needs of society. And sometimes this is called in economic terms a market failure. Sometimes we know that markets work well if there are competitive forces, but if monopoly power takes over, we end up with higher prices and less output, and that's not good for people. And so we have systems in place to promote competition and to limit monopoly power. Sometimes you'll hear about in the news a potential merger of two large corporations, and sometimes it's not allowed because it's thought they would have too much market power and thus influence the price, and that would be an inefficient outcome. sometimes there are externalities. Has anybody had a neighbor who had a big party and the decibel level was really loud? Your neighbor? Or maybe it was you. Right? So if it gets too loud, what happens? You can call the police and they'll check the decibel level, and if needed, they'll go over and knock on the door and say, I'm sorry, it's a little too loud. Or similar, we have zoning laws because some activity is loud, it's dirty, and so we set some areas aside for that kind of activity. These are positive or negative externalities that can have an impact on other people. So those are the kinds of things that we look out for, and this happens at the federal, state, and local level. There are some goods that the market economy just doesn't provide. Would we have a national defense if we didn't have it provided by government? Maybe. We have some. You know, we all have an interest in making sure that we're secure. On the other hand, we might have to collaborate in order to make that happen. That's a big need. And so one way of collaborating to make sure that kind of need is taken care of is for ourselves to act collectively, and one way to do that is through government. And then finally, sometimes there's lack of information. So what's it say on a pack of cigarettes nowadays? Yeah, warning. You know, this is known to be cancerous. So if you do this, it's on you. So that's truth. You know, that's having essential information to make a decision on it. And you may decide to smoke or not, but it's on you. But at least you have the information. It didn't used to exist. There are other kinds of reasons, you know, kinds of activities that government might play. Truth in advertising. You can't falsely advertise, or at least not legally. So for all of these reasons, we organize ourselves and we collectively make an agreement that we need these kinds of services in place. And of course, we have a structure in place that provides a whole range of services for people, and we agree collectively to do that. But then we have to pay for it. And how do we pay for it?
Taxes.
Taxes, right? A compulsory payment. You have to pay, right? And so when you come into society at different levels, we all we have a compulsory payment. We all agree that we're going to do this, and then it's our jobs to try to do the best we can with those resources. Okay, so in the United States and most large countries, Canada, Brazil, Russia, very large geographic spaces, they have federalist systems. China is one large country that does not. It's a very centralized system. But this federalism combines central government, the federal government, with regional governments, provinces or states, in a single political system. And there's this division of powers between levels of government. And the 10th Amendment of our Constitution lays this out. So we have federal, and then the states, and then underneath the states, by the authority of the state, we have local governments. And all of the powers of the locals are derived from state government. And fiscal federalism is the system of how revenues and expenditures are allocated across different levels of government. Do local governments compete or collaborate? The both, right? Sometimes they collaborate together across levels of government, county, city, townships, or across, but at the same time they compete. Where do you want to live? Do you want to live in a place with a tax service package that offers low services and low taxes, or maybe higher taxes and higher services?
Depends on your needs.
Depends on your needs, right? And every community has to make a decision. I live in a township, Bath Township here, we have pretty low taxes and not a lot of services, right? When I first moved to the area, I noticed that I had to contract for my own garbage collection. A lot of places have a single contract that's provided by the local unit for garbage services. In my old location, I paid half as much. I could see the tax bill, but in Bath, we don't do that. And it's just a choice. People want the choice to have their own services. So sometimes I will see 2 or 3 garbage trucks from different companies coming through. But that's a choice that the city makes, or that the township makes, because that's what people want there, right? And so Ann Arbor might be a high tax, high service area. Another place might be a very low tax, low service area. And there's a mix and match, and it attracts certain people and populations, and that's okay, right? So that's one of the beauties of local governments, is that you have lots of different arrangements that either attract or repel people, and choices that are made. What are the appropriate roles for subnational government in this federalist system? There are 3 categories that we could buckets that we could put in. There's a stabilization policy. This is a desire to maintain high employment and price stability. And this is primarily done at the federal level through fiscal and monetary policy. Distribution policy maintains some sort of preferred distribution of resources or income. And we may have different ideas on how much distribution is appropriate, but this is a role that we all have to struggle with. And it happens at the federal, state, and local level. In Lansing here, the city of Lansing coordinates with partners to make sure that when it gets really cold, the people who don't have a home have at least a place that's warm to go, right? That would be an example of a distribution policy. Allocation policy, this is maintaining market competition to provide goods and services. And then sometimes there are these, we call them market failures, but they're really just things that the market doesn't provide, and we collectively make arrangements to have the provision of those kinds of services, as I talked about before, public goods, etc. There are a range of local goods and services at all levels of government. And for example, you can see that public safety is provided at the local level and the state level. Roads are provided at the local level, state level, as well as federal. There are courts, and of course we have our basic sanitation and sewage services primarily provided at the local level. Although there is a lot of assistance from the state government. So these are kind of a summary of how we divide up the different types of services that we collectively agree we want or need. And then, of course, every local unit is going to make a set of decisions about how much of these services are going to be provided, and match that with a tax arrangement to meet those needs. A quick review of state revenues. You are all familiar with this, but you can see that the largest chunk of funding from state comes in the form of federal revenues from government grants and intergovernmental revenues from the federal government. We do have, well, it's a little deceptive here. We have taxes that are restricted for education, that's state education property tax statewide. There are general income and sales taxes, as well as restricted transportation-oriented gas taxes, for example, and then charges and services. So you can see there's a full gamut. And every state will have a different mix. Hawaii has a lot of services that are taxed. Why might that be? Tourism. Who would, if you were an elected official, would you rather tax a tourist or a local?
Tourist.
tourists, right? So every state has a certain set, if you have a high mineral content, you might rely more on the different types of extraction related taxes, or if you have a strong manufacturing base, maybe your tax structure would be a little different. And every state has a different mix, and you can compare and contrast, and those decisions are made based on relative strengths and needs of every state. And that's one of the beauties of the federalist system and the local system, because you have different places meeting needs in different ways. And sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it doesn't. So it's like a big experiment, and you can see what's happening around. It's a really great idea to look to other states and see how they do things. We can learn a lot from that. And not to say that what they're doing is ideal for Michigan, but it's good to see what is happening elsewhere. Okay, so we're going to spend the rest of our time looking at local government in Michigan. I'm going to do a quick review of the history and structure of local government, review county government, townships, villages, and cities, and then a quick overview of how governments are funded. So you can see here that we have a full range of local governments, and we'll talk about each. We have over 1,200 townships. This makes us one of the states with the most units of local government across the country. And it's really hard sometimes for citizens to know where their services are coming, because you have these overlapping boundaries: schools, townships, cities, villages, county. I live on a dirt road. It's not the township that grades the dirt road, it's the county. And so it takes it's sometimes hard for citizens to see where their services are coming from. The township structure comes out of the Northwest Ordinance and establishing the Northwest Territory, which was ultimately divided into 5 states: Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And this follows the model of Thomas Jefferson, where the government was supposed to be close and reachable to the people. And so we have this grid structure of townships, 6 miles by 6 miles, 36 square miles. And nowadays, not every township is structured that way, but many of them are. And it was originally designed so that somebody could either walk or go by horse easily to their local government and receive information and needs. Do we still, given today's technology, does that make sense? Maybe, but you could imagine it instead of taking all day to go to town, the town center, you can do it in 5 minutes. So anyways, having that background and understanding the structure helps us see how we have what we have today. Okay, I won't talk too much more about the details of the Northwest Ordinance, but that's one of the key elements that has resulted in the government structure that we have in Michigan, and actually in 20 other states. So local government, the important point here is that local government powers are granted existence by each state constitution, and each state defines it a little differently. And so we have political subdivision of the states. Local governments have no inherent right to exist outside of the state authority that gives it to them. And the power of local governments rests largely on provisions, interpretations of state constitutions. Local control is constantly evolving and subject to legislative agenda and courts. Locals have the power to act unless prohibited by the legislature and constitution. But the legislator has provided home rule authority, which gives local authorities quite a bit of a range of control, and given locals planning and zoning authority. But it has also removed powers. For example, right to farm legislation is a statewide law. The same thing with employee residency requirements. So the overall design of local government is, first of all, overlaying our counties that serve as outposts of state government. And counties are thought to be, are framed as agents of the state. Cities provide services for the urban population. Townships provide basic services for rural residents. And villages originally were served as a transition government from rural township to an urban center. That was the original design. So let's go through each of these areas. County governments, there are 83 Michigan counties. And you can see them in this nice map here. They're the largest political subdivision in the state. There are county governments in all but 3 states, Connecticut, Hawaii, and Rhode Island. Why no counties in these states, do you think? Pretty small, right? So Hawaii or Connecticut and Rhode Island, they're probably about the size of a large county in themselves. Just doesn't necessarily make sense. The terminology may be different. Boroughs, counties are called boroughs in Alaska. In Louisiana, it's parishes. And then sometimes what we call county commissioners are called something else, freeholders, supervisors, police jurors, judges. But they have the same structure across the entire United States. Until this year, County Board of Commissioners had 2-year terms, and now it's going to be 4-year terms, and I think that's a good move. 2 years, a lot of turnover, and not an opportunity to learn the job and then be able to be effective at it. So I think having a little longer term will be helpful for counties. So the role of the Board of Commissioners is to establish county budget policies, where appropriate, implement state policies, and connect with constituents. There are elected administrative officials for each county. Sheriff, clerks, register of deeds, treasurers, and prosecuting attorneys are all elected for 4-year terms. And then in some places, there are drain commissioners, members of road commissions can be elected, surveyors and mine inspectors. And here are a range of responsibilities of county governments. I don't think I'll read through all of those, but you have an idea. Okay. Township governments. There are 20 states with township governments. Other states do not have townships. And so who provides core services in these other states if you don't happen to live in a city? Just go straight to the county. The county would provide those core services in the broader non-urban areas. So there are different structures across the states here. Townships originally 36 square miles. Now, there's a township as small as 4 square miles to 600 square miles. My township, Bath Township, has had some annexations from East Lansing, so it's a little smaller. As I mentioned, there are over 1,200 townships in Michigan. Almost 95% of the land area is in a township, and almost half of the population in Michigan lives in a township. The population of townships range from about 10 people to 95,000 or 100,000 people. So quite a big range. What do you think about that township with 10 people? Should we have a township center in a place with 10 people? Those are the kinds of tough decisions that a township has to make, and that overlying jurisdictions have to make, and it might change over time, more people could move in. But those are the kinds of difficulties of thinking about, well, what's the proper structure, and how do we change, and how do we merge, and do we want to merge, and how do we collaborate? Most townships are general law townships, and the services are lower, and then the tax levy is limited to 1 mil operating plus extra voted millage. A charter township, however, first of all, you've got to have more people, at least 2,000 people. And here you're providing a broader array of services, and so you are also able to tax at a higher rate, up to 5 mils, plus another 5 mils with voted, extra voted villages. Does anybody know a township here in the Lansing area that is a charter township? What?
Meridian.
Yeah, Meridian Township. It really acts like a city, doesn't it? And it's interesting because Meridian Township is composed of Hazlet and Okemos, but it's really just Meridian Township, even though your address might say Hazlet. Anybody live in Meridian Township? Okay. So the modern township is responsible for a range of services, as I've listed here. So it's really evolved a lot over time, ranging from public water and sewer to health-related safety, welfare, fire protection, etc. Leadership in townships. You have a governing structure specified in the Constitution. Officials are elected for 4-year terms. And you have a supervisor, a clerk, a treasurer, and trustees, all of whom are elected. For a general law township, there are a 5-person board, all elected. A charter township board has 7, and both may hire a township manager, superintendent, or administrator. And then the board appoints various individuals to boards and commissions to help serve the township. Now, villages are an interesting unit of government. It was historically formed when population density within a township led to the need for more services. And so these townships would provide licensing and regulation, water supply, sewage, controlling and maintaining streets, sidewalks, street lighting, zoning, snow removal, etc. But if it's a village, it still remains part of the township. And residents will vote in both village elections and township elections. And if you live in a village, you pay taxes to the village and to the township. "47 of the 259 villages are charter villages, which gives them a little greater authority to provide services. The population range for villages range from 130 people to 10,000. There's a 7-person elected council for each village, and they may hire a village manager or superintendent to help them provide those core services, organize themselves. So city government, there are 272 cities with population ranging from 500 to 650,000. And actually, I'm going to get a list here. I was looking at the population of cities. I meant to bring this up with me. So, which is the largest city? Detroit, with about 640, 650,000 people. Its population has been declining and still is hopefully will stabilize, but not yet. Grand Rapids is next at about 200,000 people. And then Warren City, Sterling Heights, Ann Arbor, all have about 120 to 130,000 people. Lansing is about 110,000, and then Dearborn. Guess the number 8 largest city is actually not a city. It's a township. Clinton Charter Township. It has 100,000 people, and Canton Charter Township has 98,000 people. So these actually operate like cities. Okay. So these more densely populated areas need have different needs and different types of services, and city government and charter townships provide that. Cities have flexibility in the structure and taxing powers and in writing ordinances. They're responsible for assessing property for tax purposes, collecting taxes, as well as conducting elections. Each city charter determines a form of government. So you can have a council-manager form of government, you can have a strong mayor-council form of government, weak mayor-council form of government. How about Lansing? What kind of structure do we have here? Yeah, strong mayor-council. What happened in November for Lansing? They had an election about whether or not they would re-examine their charter. And so it didn't get a lot of attention, but over the next period of time, the city of Lansing will re-examine whether or not, what kind of form of government it's going to have. Is it going to continue with a strong mayor-council structure, or weak mayor-council structure, or some other form? So we'll see what happens. But that's a notable issue that will affect the city of Lansing. So these charters establish election dates, usually 4-year terms, usually nonpartisan, and then you have the positions of council members, and depending on the charter, election of a mayor, a clerk, and a treasurer. And different places have different structures. And decision-making is different depending on those structures, so it is important. There are a variety of city services that are provided: sidewalks, police, zoning, sewers, library, streets, recreation, parks, fire protection, water supply, transportation, trash removal. These are all core city services that are provided. Finally, we have authorities. And these are special purpose governments, and they provide services requiring large expenditures like a mass transit authority, recreational facilities, wastewater treatment, or facilitate an airport or ports or public utilities. These are all special authorities, and there are many of them. We don't know exactly how many special authorities we have in Michigan. Over 1,000. And they provide specialized services. At the beginning, I asked, do governments compete with one another and cooperate? And I think we agreed they do both. The state constitution is designed to enable local governments to, including sovereign nations, to collaborate with one another. They have the legislative power, for example, to create a metropolitan authority. Any functions, they can collaborate. I once worked on two communities, a township and a city. They each had a fire district, but one of the chiefs was getting ready to retire, and that was an opportune time for that community to consider merging their services. And they might be more efficient if they did. On the other hand, they can collaborate and coordinate activity as well. And so both of those things are good arrangements, and many communities collaborate and provide backup on police and fire and all of those kinds of things. And sometimes they just merge their services if it makes sense. But there are barriers, and it is difficult to overcome some of those barriers in actually merging. School districts sometimes merge. Are you familiar with any school districts that have merged? Out of necessity, right? You know, in some parts of the state, populations are declining. The numbers of kids are declining. And so how do you make sure that you have enough of school size and be able to efficiently provide it at a reasonable cost? And sometimes you've got to find a way to collaborate or merge. And those are hard decisions to be made. Should you become the Eagles or the Hawks? You know, everybody has these emotional ties to their schools, and same thing with their communities. There's so much emotional connection that it is sometimes difficult to really, actually fully merge. And so it's it's a challenge. Planning and zoning acts allow cooperative study arrangements, joint agreements on recreational facilities, police and fire services, and contracts, not just across cities or townships, but up and down with collaborations between county and city as well. Here's a snapshot of local revenues, their sources, and county governments will have their own set of revenues, and cities and townships, and they all track individually. But this mix is roughly about representative of all those local governments. You can see tax revenue is a major component, charges for services, which I really want to talk about here in a minute. State grants account for about 15-16% of revenues. Federal grants, direct federal grants, are about 7% of revenues. So there's a whole range, and every community has to decide on the mix of how much are we going to rely on property taxes, how much are we going to rely on charges and services. Some places are very good, there are standard intergovernmental transfers from state governments, but other communities are really good at applying for grants for specific purposes, and others have not. Let's talk about property taxes. This is the primary local government tax. It started with the Northwest Ordinance. It's used for all levels of government within Michigan, including community colleges. It's primarily a local tax, although there is the state property tax for school, the state education tax. The property tax rate is the mill, and it's $1 per every $1,000 of a property's taxable value. The property tax is therefore, on any property, is the millage rate times the taxable value of that property. There are two primary property tax limitations. One is called the Headley Amendment. In here, all tax increases must be voted on, and tax collections are limited to the rate of inflation, excluding any new property development. And if you go beyond that, the millage has to be reduced. That's called the rollback. Okay, so this sometimes can be a barrier as communities grow. Proposal A is layered over that, and this is for any individual property, the taxable value is capped by the rate of inflation. And millage votes are limited to 2 per year for the same question. And you can't roll up the millage when growth is less. And whenever a property is sold, so sometimes property values grow faster than the rate of inflation, right? But for tax purposes, your taxable value on your property grows at the rate of inflation. So there's this gap that can occur between your property value, your actual market-oriented property value based on market conditions and taxable value. So that protects the property owner. But when you sell that property, the new owner is not protected by the taxable value cap. It gets reset at the higher assessed value based on market conditions. And so what you can get are two houses sitting next to each other, and one has a tax payment down here and another a tax payment that's way up here. Because and the longtime owner is protected, and the new homeowner is not protected, at least not initially. And from that point, so sometimes this causes frustration among property owners, and I think it's reasonable to be frustrated when you see somebody paying significantly less taxes. The good news is that you're protected into the future. So this uncapping of property sometimes causes a heavy rollback, and this can have another layer of an effect on limiting revenues, especially in older industrialized areas. So the tax base is based on, again, the taxable value as we just defined. The growth of the taxable value is capped at the rate of inflation of 5% or 5%, whichever is less. And this separates the state equalized value from the taxable value and protects the property owner. When the property is sold, it is uncapped, and that creates the differential. Cities have the option of imposing an income tax. There are 22 cities that use this tax. There's a direct tax on income of residents. It's a tax on earnings for non-residents as well. I don't live in East Lansing, but East Lansing has a tax, and I pay that tax, even though I don't live in the city. For residents, the income tax is 1%, and 0.5% for non-residents usually. Detroit does have a higher tax rate. Revenue sharing comes in the form of many different, or several different sources, and I've listed them here, and you can see the link at the bottom. This is a state website that summarizes all of the revenue sharing to local governments. And I'm not going to talk about each of them just due to time constraints, but I do want to focus on the constitutional revenue sharing to villages, cities, villages, and townships. And here it's based on, the revenue sharing amount is based on 15% of the 4% portion of Michigan's 6% sales tax collection. And so in some states, they allow local governments to have an individual sales tax. In Michigan, local governments don't have the authority to do that, and so instead of that, we have this revenue sharing. And I see Matt is coming up here, and I'm going to close off. The federal monies from local governments are also shifting. That's a smaller amount. And then finally, you have fees for service revenue. And the key here is if you're a city or a local government, you're going to provide a charge a fee, it has to be tied to a specific service, and it has to be in relation to the cost of those services. There are accounting and auditing requirements provided by the state, and there are oversights for local governments as well, from accounting to auditing, planning, transparency, etc. And with that, I will close. Thanks.
Any burning questions for Mark? Yes.
Any suggestions for the uncapping differential between two neighbors that are paying different property taxes?
That's a good question, because Proposal A is a constitutional, it was imposed by referendum, so if you wanted to make a change to that, it would have to go back to the people for a referendum.
Oh, we have one more question.
One more. You were talking about the townships and cities. I noticed that in the villages as well, you didn't include the neighborhood associations, which charges neighbors for different dues. And if the dues are late, they're able to levy a lien on the home. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because they're becoming more prominent throughout the city. Throughout the state,
Yeah.
in the city of Detroit.
That's a really great question. Some of us live in neighborhood associations, and those neighborhood associations will provide some services. They may have a swimming pool, snow plowing, just within it might be a gated community. And that is actually a private entity. And so there's a question about the collaboration between the neighborhood associations and the cities, and sometimes that can be a little bit tough to negotiate because the neighborhood association provides a specific set of services just to that community and charges a fee. So that is a growing area, and I think a challenge for cities to sort of think about how to make everything work in that context.
Thank you.
Thank you. We know there's a lot of details. You will get the PowerPoint and video afterwards, but you got some good annoying party chatter here as well. If someone says they live in Okemos, you can tell them you live in the Okemos School District, but the only city, your city government is Meridian Township. People ask you why this neighborhood is in two townships. You can tell them Thomas Jefferson drew straight lines on a map in 1787, where we still have them. And if someone asks you why their property tax is too high, you can have a long list of reasons for that. We're pleased next to have Jennifer Dettloff from the Legislative Service Bureau and Shanda Greco from the Legislative Service Bureau Research Division to tell us about MISource.
Good morning. How is everyone today?
Fantastic!
Yes, I got one. Okay, that's all I need. My name is Jen. I really appreciate you guys making some time for us this morning. Right now we're handing out these resource guides. As Matt mentioned in the program, I am the director of the Legislative Service Bureau and the Council Administrator, so oversee LSB and the council agencies. We're going to run through that real quick and I'll hand it over to Shanda. As way of background for me, I started off in this building. I started labeling maps right out of college. That was my first job and kind of worked my way through the system. So I've done consent work, I've done policy work, I've done legal counsel work, and then moved over to the council and was graciously appointed to serve over there. I've been over there for the past 8 years. So I'm going to run through this quickly. As I mentioned, I'm the director of LSB. So under LSB, on the back of this kind of runs through all the different agencies that we have. The Service Bureau is the largest. I'm sure you've heard of that the most. You know, the legal division, we have over 20 attorneys that draft all of your bills, do your resolutions are Shanda's team. Joint resolutions are in the legal division. We have the research team also housed with a handful of attorneys that do your research requests, resolutions, tons of historical information. Chances are the question that you have, they've already seen it. They already have the information. They can update it, turn it around to you, give them a timeline you're working with. Hey, my boss has a township meeting on Tuesday next week. He really needs the background on this issue. We can pull that information, get it to you. You guys can do what you will with it, if it's policy development or if it's putting your talking points together, whatever that is. Our print shop prints these beautiful books, all of your letterhead, booklets, newsletters, etc. And then our IT division as well, which handles the MyLeg website and the MISource website, which Shanda will walk through today. Under the council umbrella is also two ombudsman offices, the corrections ombudsman. So if you have a prison in your district, or maybe a corrections officer in your district that has questions about the facility they're in, or your boss wants an investigation on an issue or things like that, we can help with that. And then the Veterans Affairs Ombudsman as well is housed under our umbrella. Also, same thing if you have the Veterans Home in your district. We can assist in any of the questions you have about, working with the management team there or problems that are going on in the home. So that is a quick rundown of our shop. If you remember nothing else from anything I've said, all of the phone numbers are on the back. Please call us. We are completely nonpartisan, confidential. None of our staff can tell anyone else outside your office what you call us about, what you ask about. We can't tell about the research request. We can't talk about your printing request even. So everything is completely confidential. There is no question. We are unwilling to ask, and if we don't know the answer, we likely know where you can go. So my number at the top is the 30212. Call, text, carrier pigeon, anything that goes to my cell phone after hours too. Anything you need, we're happy to help, and thank you for your time. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Shanda. I'm gonna have to close this and hook up here. So as Jen said, and so did Matt, I'm Shanda Greco. I am the Research Services Division Director. Similar to Jen, I started in Hub, labeling booklets and making scheduling calls and things like that. So I've been around for quite some time. Now I serve as the Research Division Director, and if you're not familiar with us, like Jen said, we can help you draft resolutions. We provide legal research. We have 8 attorneys in addition to myself across the street to help answer your questions. And probably the lesser known thing that we do, like Jen said, is kind of constituent work sometimes with you. So if you have a meeting coming up in your district that you need some information for, or just a weird call that you're not quite sure how to address, we can help you work through that. What I'm going to talk to you more about today is the legislative website. How many of you are familiar, I guess, with basic functionality on here? Because I don't want to be overly redundant. Okay, so I'm probably gonna focus on some of the lesser known aspects of the website. Can you raise your hand if you already have a login for the website? Okay, less of you. So I'm gonna start there. This is one of the things that most people don't know about. So if you can register with the website and personalize what it looks like, as well as sign up for notifications and kind of create some useful tools to help you with your job. So I'm going to log in, and unfortunately I'm going to lead with the thing that I normally close with, which is you can customize the color. And I'm sorry, MSU, but I am Wolverine. So this is my color. So one of the things that I really like about it, I'm just going to start easy with, is the layout function, and you can add these kind of hovering search functionality pieces to either side of the screen. So the one I use most frequently is bills by number and MCL by section. I have those over here. And then my other favorite is bills by PA affected, and so I have that over there. But there's other things available if you use them more frequently, like calendars or rules or something like that. You can add those on there as well. The other aspect that you might not know about is the notify section. So you can sign up for notification for bill activity, MCL activity. So like whenever a compilation gets updated, you can look by both like complete public act as well as individual MCL sections. You can sign up for those notifications as well as bill activity. So if a bill is moving throughout the process, you can get a notice. The other thing is you can create lists based on different parameters.
I'm going to jump in real quick.
Yep.
When I did policy work and my boss had a bill, what I would do is track not only the bill that my boss was working on, but also I wanted to know what other bills were going through the legislative process, because maybe there was a way to get my boss's language in that other bill. And if I knew all of the bills amending that same section of law, I could track it and I would get email notifications. And that just saved me searching every morning or looking at an agenda for every committee hearing about bills that might impact what my boss was doing. You know, my boss loves tax policy. I'm going to track every tax policy thing I can possibly find, committees, bills that amend that section, all of that. So that's where it might be more applicable to kind of the policy work you're doing.
Yeah. The other thing would be just tracking your boss's bills. So once you sign in, pretty much every bill page or MCL page actually has the option to subscribe to it.
So I'm actually going to do a bill search and subscribe to all of them. I'm going to do it by sponsor. And probably you already have processes for tracking the bills that you're responsible for. The lesser known one is probably the ones that your boss might be co-sponsoring on the floor that you're not aware of and that you might want to be able to find. So that's the search I'm going to do, is secondary and primary sponsorship. And I'm just going to pick further Ayash because he's at the top here. And you can, oh shoot. So I have this whole list here, and I can file them and create. I can create a page within my login now that has all of those. So it's something you can kind of track and revisit and add to as you go. So. So now I have those here. That search is saved. I can continue to revisit it at any time. Let's see. Also, the other page that you got is a resolution quick sheet. So that is something that we don't necessarily publish unless you come to some of our trainings. I'm not going to cover it today, but resolution types can be very confusing. So this is making it a little bit more visual and easy for you to see a different type of resolution that you might want to use for something. And if you have more questions on that, we will be having a meet and greet with all of the LSB agencies next Wednesday, which they're also passing out right now, and we can talk more about that there. But in the meantime, I want to go over some of the kind of lesser known bill search functionality. So, let's see. I think everyone is probably most familiar with the bill number and keywords. If you don't know or have kind of glossed over a lot of the text on here, one of the most useful functions is the wildcard. So this search is very literal, and if it starts frustrating you, try going broader. So if you're looking for a very specific phrase, you might not be coming up with something, but very often what we will do is start very big and kind of search within until we get what we're looking for. Or another example is if I'm looking, I can't think of a good example right now. Well, the Constitution would be the only example I can think of. So if you're trying to find everything that says Constitution, constitutional, state constitution, you might want to use a wildcard, which is the asterisk, to get all of those results. But I'm going to, oops. Again, I leave out all of the individual type things, or type words because it ends up confusing it, but I will do this and then search within. So now I have all of the bills where in the description of the bill it says freedom of information. And you can see that pulled up quite a bit. So maybe I want to look for exemptions. Now I'm going to, oh, that's my example, it's exemption. Rather than doing exemption, I'm going to use the wildcard. And now I'm looking at just the bills introduced this session that have FOIA exemption in what they're dealing with. The other thing that the search within is good for is if you already know what MCL section you're looking to amend, like Jen said, you're kind of trying to get that language in somewhere else, you can actually search within these documents for a specific section to see if any of them are there, and that will narrow it down even further. One thing to note on our website is that the back button doesn't always work, but you can go back to your search results once you actually do get to a page that you're looking for by using this button here. So if that's something that's frustrating you, don't forget about that button. There's also the navigate search results arrows as well that help kind of stay within the parameters that you've already narrowed down. Since we're on this bill page, I want to go over kind of everything that you can see here. There's, once you're logged in, again, if you're finding something that is on point, you can either file that into kind of a pre-designated folder. So saying you're doing research on FOIA, you can have a FOIA folder where you can save MCL sections, bills, whatever policy that you're looking at. You can kind of save all of that as you go, and you have it there to, like, if you get interrupted, go back and re-review it. Or you can notify yourself of changes here. And this will, every time a new document is posted, a bill analysis is posted, or it actually sees movement, so it gets new history, it will update there as well. We also have all of the recent journals on the website. So this is one where, like, if you're looking for legislative history, say you want to know what the vote count was when it was on the floor, who voted for it, you can use these direct journal links right here, and that will take you to the journal where that action happened. This is a bad example because it didn't actually go anywhere. I didn't follow my own advice and actually use the return to search results, but I'm gonna actually get up an example here. So we typically do the Control F to find those. So once you know your bill number, you can go back and find those vote tallies in the journals if you're not familiar with that. Another useful function is committee history. So if you're interested in seeing who might have been in support or provided testimony on a bill, the best way to do that would be to go to the committee record page. Or I'm sorry, the actual committee bill records. So I am going to, let's see here. We will, for example, go to criminal justice, and this is 73. So you can click right from bill history to get to the bill record here, and then of course there's a bunch of 73s on this, so here we go. So here it is, and this gives the date that it was actually heard in the committee. So you can kind of write that down, and now you know that the committee minutes you're going to want to look at are June 13th of 2023 to either look at who testified in support or against, or if they provided any testimony. And that will take you to the individual pages for the House and the Senate, is where you need to go next for that. So you can actually go to the committee homepage. In this instance, it doesn't go like that. So I would go to the minutes, which, same thing. Going back to the website, the MCL is set up very similarly. So one of the big things to probably mention is how public acts are treated under the two functionalities. So you'll see the public act signed bills. This page will actually take you directly to that bill page. So if you're looking for the analysis for the Amendatory Act, this is the page that you want. The other thing that we recently added that is super helpful is these effective date information tables down here. So this sine die effective dates is literally every sine die, and then the corresponding effective date for that. Or you can see the most recent bills, specifically their effective date. So we now have those tables available online. If you're curious of when a bill actually took effect, you don't have to do that calculation yourself anymore, it's there. This will give you all of the public acts for a given year, and the dates that it, all of the action took place on that. Whereas if you go to the Public Act MCL search, This is taking you to the original bill, and in the way that it is compiled within the MCL. So for the example I'm going to use is FOIA. And see, that takes me to the main page. Again, we have the option to add any of these to my print basket. So what this will do is I can choose disparate sections and create a, I'll call it pretty, PDF to print them all together on. So say you were doing your FOIA research, but you also wanted to include sections from a different act that isn't the Freedom of Information Act. You can select all of those and put them in a print basket together, and they will print in one PDF in the way that you want them to, which is kind of nice. You can also sign up for notifications this way. And one way to get to the bills affecting an MCL is this link up here, or an entire act. So there's two ways to do that. This takes you to it, but you can either get to it that way or by going to, under bills, it says search by PA affected. That's also my little cheat sheet I have down here. And this gives a much narrower view of doing a keyword search for bills, because it's only the bills amending that section. So especially in the case of FOIA, if you're looking to just work within the parameters of FOIA, this is great. What this wouldn't give you is things like the new LORA that has been proposed, because it's a new act, not an amendatory act. So that's just something to bear in mind when you're doing those searches, is that this can be somewhat limiting, but also very helpful if you're just looking within an individual act. Do we have any questions so far? Okay. What's that? Okay. I am also going to switch gears a little bit here and go to MISource because I only have like 5 minutes left. So if you aren't familiar with it, you should be. This is, especially if you're a newer staff, this might be something you're not familiar with, but this is essentially the portal that we use to communicate with you guys. So you can submit your bill requests, you can view your bill requests, research, policy resolutions, all of that is done through this website.
Does everyone have access to MISource?
Okay. One key thing to note is that especially if you are newer, you need your boss to give you permission to actually view the request for your office. And if you haven't done that, you can either have them do it through their settings here, which is manage security, or you can email our IT division, CC your boss, and say, we want, such and such needs permission to view all of my requests, and that is sufficient for them to do that for you. This is, I'm going to do research, but all of your forms can be found here to submit new requests. Give us as much background information as possible, both for bills and for research. One of the nice things is we can work with legal. So if you want us to, if you already have a bill request that you've put in, you're kind of at a standstill, you need some research done on that, make sure you actually put in the number so we know what drafter to go to, and we can say, hey, we got this resolution, or this bill request, this research request related to this bill draft. This is what they're looking for, and we can kind of get the whole background from them as to like what your issue, like kind of where you're at in that process, what you might need to know from us, and that helps you a great deal. It helps everybody and kind of keeps the flow of information going. Same for resolutions. Again, the more information that you can provide, the better. House clerks require policy resolutions to be drafted by research division, but we want to work with you and make sure that the voices that we're putting in there are actually indicative of how your boss feels on something. So we ask that you put in supporting arguments that we can actually do the research on and beef up a little bit. If you have any questions on that, and if you, just give us a call. If you're not sure how to fill this out, or you're not sure, you need a little bit more research done before the resolution can be introduced, we're here for you, so just give us a call. And I think that's kind of it. Again, you can get your printing, you can submit a corrections ombudsman request here. So if you have either a constituent who has a family member who's incarcerated, or you have a prison in your district, it might be something to bear in mind that you can put in a request that on behalf of that person, work directly with them to investigate that issue. And then bills and joint resolutions. Again, if you don't have permission, you won't be able to view them, but once you do, that is another helpful function here, is that you can view everything that's been put in for your office. So especially if you have multiple people in your office kind of putting in requests, you should be able to view everything that you have put in together. And so it's very important to get that permission. Yeah, any other questions? All right.
Any questions on anything LSB related, or all the services are great, no complaints, everybody's happy? Okay. Our numbers are on the back. If you remember nothing else, please call us. There's no question we probably have not seen. There are no dumb questions. We are here to literally serve you. That is our whole purpose. I always say our middle line of service, or our middle name is service. It literally is. So do not hesitate to reach out if there's something that we can do to assist you or just answer questions. Again, thank you for having us. Information for next week, we'll have every single division here. You can pop in anytime on Wednesday between 10 and noon. I know it's a busy day with State of the State, but anything you think of, we'll have our whole team here to help. So
Yeah, especially on the websites, we like bring your laptop if you want help like doing something specifically. We're here to teach you just as much as we're here to do it for you. So if you actually need to get the permission on MISource, or you want help getting a login on the website and setting it up in a certain way, like bring your laptop, we'll help you with that. Okay. All right, thanks.